So imagine you're at Red Rocks. The music's loud, thousands of people packed into the venue. I mean, maybe you've taken a little psychedelics or something. I mean, maybe your friend has right next to you. And you never know, maybe something unexpected happens. Suddenly, what seemed like a beautiful evening turns into one of the most difficult experiences of your life. Who shows up? What do they do? How do they help someone through that moment without trying to control it? And what can thousands of these interactions teach us about psychedelics, mental health, and human beings in general? Today, we're going to be talking to someone who spent years doing exactly that. Welcome back to Divergent States, the unofficial Our Psychonaut podcast. I'm Elite, founder of Our Psychonaut, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Bryan. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, man?
Doing good. I'm hanging out, ready. I mean, such a great conversation with Case. I mean,
Right.
they're embedding in to Red Rocks now, which is really cool. We hear some really cool statistics. We get to talk about what they've done and what they're doing, and not just at Red Rocks, but festivals all over.
Right.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to see them one day in action. That'll be a lot of fun, I think.
Oh, I think we will.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good. I don't know whether it's a burn or a festival somewhere, and it'd be really cool to kind of sit down and see it in action too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But so today we're going to be diving into a topic that a lot of people have heard about, but relatively few people actually understand. If you spend any time around psychedelic spaces, you've probably heard the name Zendo Project. Maybe you've seen them at festivals. Maybe you've heard that someone mention them as psychedelic peer support, or maybe you've just heard the phrase of sitting with someone through a difficult experience. But what does that actually look like in practice? When someone is having a difficult experience at a concert, a festival, or some large event, what happens? Who shows up? What are they trained to do? And what can we learn from those thousands of interactions? One thing I'm really interested in today is pulling back the curtain on the work itself. Um,
Yeah, that
yeah,
sounds pretty like I, it will be a lot of fun to understand like exactly what like from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave, like what that looks like.
right. Right. A lot of the conversations that we have focus on research and policy, legislation, personal transformation. And those are all still really important conversations. But there's also a very practical side to the world that often, goes unnoticed. And the
Hmm.
people who are there when things don't go according to plan. So we're also going to talk about Zendo's work at events like Red Rocks, what it actually means to embed psychedelic peer support in a venue environment. What does that look like from the inside? What kind of situations arise? And what lessons have emerged from doing this work in the real world? So we're going to be talking to Case Newsom from the Zendo Project, and we'll be right back. Before we jump in, a quick disclosure. Bryan and I are both Zendo Project ambassadors. While we're volunteers and not employees, we do have a discount code through the Zendo's training programs, Divergent S10. If someone chooses to use that code for eligible training programs, we may receive financial benefit. That relationship doesn't affect the questions we're going to be asking today. But we just want to be transparent about it so listeners can make their own informed decisions. would be Case. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your role at Zendo Project?
Hi, I'm Case Newsom, and I am Zendo Project's medical director. I joined just over 3 years ago, but had been following the Zendo Project since its inception in 2012. And my specific task was to create a medical triage and observation protocol and create a volunteer role that would follow through on the protocol at all times in which we're providing peer support services for folks that are undergoing heavy or non-ordinary state experiences. There is always a likelihood at some point that there's going to be some medical needs within a guest that's experiencing a non-ordinary state, but they might have difficulty being able to convey that. And so we needed folks that would be able to authentically use their healthcare skills to keep an eye on these individuals. By following a protocol, we make sure that it's clean, concise, and can serve over each event and over every encounter. And it's really been an incredible challenge in all the best ways, where we're able to workshop something over these last few years to create something really clean that I think is also scalable to other organizations and other milieus than just large events like festivals. We've been bringing it into nightlife and metro area events where I live in Denver as well, with great success. And the hope is that we can help to kind of bring this safety apparatus to other peer support services around the nation.
That's really cool. How did you first get involved in work like this?
I was kind of called in by a few people that I already knew. I'm an emergency medicine physician, and I had worked in the activism realm in Denver since 2018 during the original decrim push in the city. And so I was kind of a known entity around our local milieu here as a physician that was comfortable speaking on such things. And a few other physicians that I knew that were in the scene had gone to Burning Man and had volunteered with the Zendo Project, and had kind of dropped my name with the leadership. And they came back into Denver and they hit me up. They're like, yo, you need to go work with this group. They're doing great work, but they really need an emergency physician to help create a safety making apparatus like you could make. Partly, I'd already had experience as a medical director as well for 3, maybe 4 years at that time. I am the medical director for Stadium Medical, which is a EMS agency in Denver. We do have a 911 catchment area for ambulance calls and things, but mostly what we do is cover events around the city, thousands of events a year. And so I had already been overseeing that as a director for event medicine in many ways. And so it was kind of in my wheelhouse to extend that level of oversight and creating protocols and standard operating procedures for another organization. It just seemed like a natural fit. And once I started having some discussions with leadership at Zendo Project, it just became super clear that we had a lot of resonant qualities. We had a very similar sensibility of how to meet individuals that are having distress or having unsafe situations, where we can meet them as a person, not just as a professional with a hierarchical, like, I'm the doctor, you're the patient. I've never practiced that way. I've always wanted to be able to meet folks where they are, whether I'm teaching or engaging clinically or providing mentorship, all of it. And the Zendo Project is just so much like that as well, just so heart open and endearing individuals. And so I got pulled into the family basically because it was a natural fit from the start.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, if you're already in that kind of the wheelhouse, as you're mentioning, and just a natural fit. And that's always probably the best kind of fit you can have.
They had said when I joined, my first ever actual in real life experience with the Zendo after I had created the protocol was at the Texas Eclipse Festival in Austin, or just outside Austin, a few years ago. And one of the nicest things that's ever been said to me was it came from one of the operations leads, Ben Halper, who is brilliant and an incredible sitter and operational lead. And he gives me a hug as we're leaving the event, and he says, Zendo Project had a case-sized hole in it that you're filling. It was honestly one of the nicest things I've ever heard. I hold that dear to this day. And things like that feeling of it being a total meshing of our outlook, our sensibilities, our desire for the outcomes to be so great for these folks that are needing peer support, all of that being such in alignment it just keeps me in the work all the time. I like pretty much every spare minute that I have, I'm thinking about how to make it better, how to like be able to take this organization and make it all the more capable to lead by example. And everybody is so supportive of my efforts. It's so satisfying.
Right. And I mean, it seems like it's, like I said, that's one of my favorite things about, I guess, psychedelics and in the industry is that synchronicity that seems to come up with different, organizations or where you fit in or where you're working. They seem to work themselves out sometimes. And so it's a
Right.
great feeling when, I guess the old adage used to be, I love it when a plane comes together. Kind of the same thing. But so can you tell us a little bit of like how the Zendo project was founded and like its relationship with maps?
Yeah. So the Zendo Project, for anybody who's listening that hasn't heard, we are a nonprofit organization that is a harm reduction focused organization with many different elements at this point. The original intention of the group was to provide peer support, sanctuary spaces, and psychedelic care for folks that are having an overwhelming experience. And through that, a few principles kind of rose up like the cream on top of milk. And we were able to articulate those about a decade ago, while we were still an expression of MAPS as an organization. We were one of their outreach and harm reduction wings. I was not involved at that point, but the folks that created this work at that time, I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants like Whitebird Clinic, and various like clowning communities. And there's all sorts of different versions of being able to tend to folks in non-ordinary states. But this was probably the most cohesive expression of creating the principles and then turning around and trying to lead by example and educating the industry on how to do this and resourcing folks to be able to do something like a Zendo sit in their own Burning Man camps, for instance, where we had been working since 2012, or in their own communities in the underground. And harm reduction was kind of coming as a large umbrella term, meaning many different things. But this sort of point of care, guest care, compassionate care in person in real life when somebody was having an emergency type of response, is that was the original idea. We are now able to provide education in many different realms for how to do this. There's natural medicine facilitation clinics, ketamine clinics that insist on this training for their staff. We have done this training for first responders, EMS, sheriffs. We've been able to do this for psychiatric services and large health networks. And because the principles really are not just for psychedelic care, it's more that the psychedelic care that we were providing was in a way like a workshop or an experimental ground for how to be able to provide peer support for anyone that's experiencing something that's overwhelming, whether it's grief or trauma, reliving assaults, reliving traumatic experiences, or it's psychedelic in nature, psychoactives leading to overwhelm, whatever it may be, the same fundamentals are at play. It's just that it became clear during the work for the last 14 years that these principles were important. So the Zendo Project's focus is on creating safe spaces for individuals in a peer capacity while they're navigating that challenging experience, as opposed to providing any sort of guidance or any therapeutic modality. Our focus is on assisting a person through the experience, sitting in witness, sitting in validation, being able to provide some grounded energy for the person to continue to have that experience in a safe way so they're not feeling overly vulnerable. And it's something that I want every single person in healthcare to know. It's something I want everybody that is navigating family difficulties to know, or social circle ruptures. I mean, all of these, it's like a through line for how to be able to maintain your own composure, take your own pulse first, resource yourself to be able to witness somebody in their struggle so that they feel seen and understood by another human. And that is so profoundly healing. But it is something that actually can be a technique. It takes some practice to be able to do that. I mean, some people are naturally good at it. I was not naturally amazing at that. I was like a take charge, be in the action, technically objective, scientific focused physician. My job was always to be in control and have all my faculties with me. And yet, so much of the healing for patients I was taking care of was just sitting with them and always trying to achieve consent, validating their identity, their needs. Is it okay if I touch your shoulder during this moment? That is as important as sometimes starting the right antibiotic when somebody's sick, or when somebody is experiencing something challenging and they're just talking it through with you. You don't necessarily have to offer a perspective or a solution or an intervention for their situation. You can just say, that's really hard, but you have to mean that you hear that it's really hard. And how do you do that? We teach that these days. And so we have a reach much beyond, Burning Man, which was the crucible that we came from. In the event realm, yes, we do this work in person, but gosh, just being able to have folks resourced with our having named these things and bringing it in a package to get them educated, everybody's starting to feel more comfortable after they've worked with the Zendo Project to do this on all realms of their existence. It's just the most beautiful thing, honestly.
Right. Yeah. It's really, I mean, I've recommended even the Zendo Project training, their SIT training, even for, not necessarily altered states, just to learn how to be more present, how to be aware, and because it's just a good principle to use in life, as you're saying.
Right. And I bet it has a profound effect on somebody who's in an altered state, because it has a profound effect on someone when you're sober and you're just dealing with, something
right.
heavy or whatever. But to also be in that vulnerable state, and I think we've all been there, at some point, that means a lot when somebody's able to do that. So I think that's pretty great.
Thank you both for saying that. I'd love to ask, have you, in your lived experience, received peer support in any fashion where it felt like that was the specific thing that you needed, whether it would be in community or in family or what have you, but something that you were trying to navigate on your own? And even without somebody providing a solution, just there being there for you at all made it so that you achieved clarity and maybe equanimity with the situation. And then you can kind of navigate it from a position of a holistic understanding of yourself in that experience, rather than almost spinning out on all of the things. It's too many threads to hold. And then somebody just acting as a grounding just to see it is sometimes all you need. I'm curious if you guys have experiences like that. And if so, come work with the Zendo Project.
I would say 100%. Yeah. And then specifically in context to, psychedelics and stuff, I remember I had taken mushrooms for the first time and I was with a bunch of people I didn't really know. And I was not having a great experience, I would say. But one of the people that was there, she didn't take anything. And there was a couple other guys that showed up too. And they were able to help me by just doing kind of what you talked about, by just being there. Like, they didn't try to solve the problem for me. Like, they didn't try to, fix anything. They just helped me by just listening. And I think if I hadn't had them there, that experience probably would have been significantly more, I don't want to say traumatizing, but would have been much more difficult to navigate. So I've had that experience of having somebody available that can listen and be present with you while you're going through an experience like that, while you're overwhelmed. And it was, I would say, vital for sure.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes even, whether altered states or not, it's good to have someone just who can be there for you. Just, sit with you in that space. I know I have a problem with I try to fix things a lot of times. I'm autistic. So my first reaction is always just, oh, okay, how do I fix this? How can I, get this from point A to point B? And a lot of times I've got to stop and remember that, just to be able to slow myself down, sit a little bit, just be present in the moment. And that's a good lesson for anybody to learn, really.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love the reflection on knowing that you have a predisposition to wanting to solve. Of course, me as well. And one thing I've learned while trying that approach, over the thousands of patients I've cared for and hundreds of folks I've sat and held space for, a lot of times I realize I actually have insufficient knowledge of what the problem for them actually is. And so I'm coming in with a half-baked solution, even if it's the most well-intended. And so I found it's as likely or even more so to help somebody when they have a problem if I can just offer them blanket or some tea or something.
Right. Just something simple, the simple
Yeah,
comfort to
do you
just
want to walk? You seem like you're needing to move a little bit? Maybe that would feel good to help with how you're experiencing this. Do you want to walk? Do you want to move with me? Um, Always trying to just give them options rather than having a directive. And one of the most difficult things about my role with the Zendo Project is since we've brought the Zendo Project into the Denver metro area alongside Stadium Medical, we don't have the freedom of a sanctuary space all the time anymore. We're embedded within the first aid often. And so that kind of limits the circumstances that we can cultivate for the person's experience. And also, events end and you got to go. And it would be so wonderful if we could always engage in fully non directive language like we can at a 24/7 event, where you can hang out here as long as you need and we can authentically hold that space for them. And so one of the struggles has been kind of adapting the peer support approaches and the technical parts of having a space that we cultivate and can run it all the time until everybody is through their experience. Now we're trying to have to bring in some amount of directive language because at 2 a.m. we have to be gone. And so how do we work on not compelling a person, not overtly directing them, but helping assist them through the process of coming out of that setting and continuing to provide peer support? Or if the person ends up having to leave with a friend or even sometimes in an ambulance or something because it's the only way out of the setting, how can we assist in that process so it's not so damaging and it's much more understood, or to the level that you can understand it, it's much more acceptable for the guest in question. And so a lot of that is leading by example, where we're trying to extend the circles of compassionate care that we provide to other service lines, to other people in the field, so they can kind of carry on the way in which they're providing presence, even if they're not any longer in the Zendo Project's care anymore. If I've made myself clear, it's really just that this needs to be ripples so that we can all do this,
Yeah, it makes sense. Now I'm imagining somebody who's not having a good time and you're like having to like try to break down a tent or something at the same time. And you're like, oh yeah, of course. That's probably pretty challenging.
I had an experience with a broken tent at a festival where everybody trying to repair the thing was on mushrooms. And it was comical. There was a lot of trickster archetypes showing up. There was wind. There was like embers blowing and stuff from a local fire in the area. And everybody ended up actually like being in a dark place to start. But something about the mission, that there was something that we had to attend to, kind of brought a presence for all of us, that we had a cohesive feeling of duty altogether. And it was like laughable and energizing, but also we got kind of like stuck in the mud cognitively a little bit. And of course we're tripping. And so it's just like down the rabbit hole of like how to tie this tent back together and like what knot. And then you tie 9 knots. And were they even the same? I think they were. Was it 1,000 knots? Like all that stuff. So sometimes the settings actually can play to your advantage of providing something like some orientation. And so sometimes when we're sitting, we can actually like, you can kind of like snap your finger or tap or do something that kind of alters the way the situation feels. And that just like totally reorients a person. And so there's a way to kind of do that as you're breaking down the tent or you're handing them off into the next person's care, where you can actually kind of make it part of the experience of that person's like unraveling and reattaching their psyche back in and out of existence, if you will. And there are people that are incredible at that, and so I'm still learning all the time on like how we can maximize that in different settings for people.
Yeah, I can imagine that can be challenging at times, especially, with varying conditions, as you mentioned, with embers or stuff, or maybe there's a storm coming in or something, and
Mhm.
there's environmental factors that you can't really control. So it makes it, the variables are pretty tough, along with the human element, which, I mean, so that's kind of leads me to my next, you guys are starting to embed with Red Rocks now. Um, how did you guys start getting involved with that?
So, as the medical director for Stadium Medical, I am essentially overseeing it's got to be over 90% of venues in Denver for all concerts and sporting events as well. So the reach is really expansive for Stadium Medical, providing on-site first aid and ambulance care, transportation services for medical things at all these events. And so Zendo Project started to work with Stadium Medical essentially because I saw that Stadium was great compared to their peers in providing humane, compassionate care for individuals in non-ordinary states. But they also have to take care of heart attacks and broken ankles and seizures and I mean, it's just not something that you can then authentically provide ongoing peer support and grounding for a person that's having a big experience while other stuff is rolling in. And so that was really scattering for folks. And so even as great as Stadium was, they there's the right person for the right job, if you will. So I saw that overseeing both organizations. And so we put together a pilot over last year and into this year where we started to try to find a physical space at Red Rocks, firstly, where we were going to do a sanctuary type production. But it quickly became clear that we had to work within Stadium Medical because there just wasn't physical space reliably for all the shows. And so then it was a question of how do we create an operational workflow to have something like a sanctuary space within first aid and something like a back and forth handoff methodology or a diverting mechanism to see a person that's being presented into first aid and recognize if they're medical in as a primary need or if they can be diverted to peer support and sanctuary services over this way. And I was holding those pieces as the doctor at the front that was able to make that determination based on an assessment I could do for the person arriving. And then it started to get to where folks were the other service lines like security and medical were seeing the immediate value. And we maybe done 2 or 3 shows just to kind of practice this and see with like a skeleton crew from the Zendo Project. And Stadium Medical, all of the EMTs and paramedics are so bright and wanted to learn. They were peppering everybody with questions and seeking some advice and to get resourced in their own techniques for how to do this. And security started to see that we were doing that in medical, and we started to go out into the field doing field calls with a coordinator that's one of the more experienced Zendo sitters and going out into the field to help work with a person on site so that it didn't turn into a tackle sedation type of situation in the field and broad view of everyone. Which is how we do things at festivals. Like at Burning Man and other festivals, it's always been that we're tactical. We can go do search and rescue, if you will, and be able to comfortably and safely get individuals back into the sanctuary. But being embedded within first aid was a challenge just because of space and the needs for things to be sterile and clinical feeling. And so Stadium has been able to work with us to create a more comfortable setting. And it's having its positive effect on everybody. And the guests that come in that would have become patients and are turned instead into peer support receiving guests, they are so appreciative. They're telling everybody how great it was. Security and medical have their own needs for customer service and satisfaction. The venue management started to see what was happening. They're getting amazing reviews on our service. And it started to take shape as this like triumvirate approach for safety making at large events where you have security for the physical safety in the field and on in scenes, and then you have medical for the bodily and health safety of a person's actual physical self, and then you've got peer support that's providing the psychological support for the psychospiritual element of what's unfolding. And all three of those being attended to, it's just evidently valuable. We showed that at Red Rocks. We started to get invited into other containers within Denver. Specifically, we worked at Decadence, which is a 2-night rave, about 25 to 30,000 people a night inside the large convention center in Denver. It's over New Year's, and so it's like freezing outside. And it's an indoor rave. I mean, it's like EDC got compacted into an airport or something, like, or a hangar is what it feels like. Very strange setting to endeavor with, heroic doses of psychedelics, if you will. And a couple years ago, Stadium Medical was all on their own, and we had 54 ambulance transports to the hospital over 2 nights, all requiring either sedation or ongoing observation by technical staff or nursing staff in emergency departments. We're gumming up the healthcare system, et cetera. The ambulances were just on constant rotation because there was not a way to safely handle these individuals in the field on site in this convention center. And so that was the Vertex 2 years ago, 54. This last year, we brought Zendo Project and embedded in this way that we had pioneered at Red Rocks. And we brought it down to 17 hospital transports. And most of those were actual medical catastrophes that really needed emergency care, not for non-ordinary states. So we were able to manage most everything on site. And the venue production teams and reps from AEG, which is sort of the industry gorilla in the room. I mean, they like just these big players for these large traveling musical event productions saw right there firsthand the evidence of the value generated by and the safety making and the liability reduction, et cetera, for our being there. And so Red Rocks was the little kernel for that to start in the metro nightlife. And now, I mean, we're off to the races. We're doing, I think over this year, we're going to be up to like 26, 27 events over this year in Denver alone. So I have eternal gratitude for the staff at Red Rocks, all the medical and the security lines, because they were willing to work with us and they gave us the benefit of the doubt and an opportunity to come in and do our work. And within the first show, they were like, this is the future. Let's do this. Like, how do we advocate for this? And now we have a full on, briefing and debriefing methodology. We're connecting on all the calendar for all the different shows. Like, it's becoming very professional in how we bring peer support into these spaces. Thanks to Red Rocks.
I imagine that the hospitals are also very grateful. That was like something I was thinking about as we got this conversation started. I was like, man, I can only imagine how many people are like, thank God I don't have to pick up another person that's just tripping way too hard and thinks they're going to die, when I've got a car wreck and a stabbing and this person got beat up and these other things that are obviously more significant, instead of having to deal with someone that's just tripping too hard.
I agree. I mean, I am an emergency doctor and I do this as part of my career additionally. And even I don't like getting those patients into the ED. And maybe it's not because I'm insecure about that management. Like, I know how to handle those folks in a humane way because of having learned it with the Zendo Project. But still, even if I'm comfortable in taking care of them, it's just the worst place for a patient to be experiencing such a heightened psychoactive state. I mean, Can you imagine? I mean, these folks they're traumatized when they come in and they're being restrained and sedated and yelled at often. And a lot of that, it comes from the manner in which we take control of situations for other issues, whether it's like violent activity or alcohol intoxication, or you have unscrupulous people that are involved in somebody's care. Like, a lot of times we have to power up and be the authority in the room, right? And there's a lot of merit to that. I'm not going to sit here and say you should never do that. But with this particular cohort of patients, you should never do that, right? And clearly, it's difficult to get that through to staff at hospitals or in jails or at any sort of public-facing facility, because these are hardened folks that have done good work for a long time. It's difficult to change, And so actually, one of the first initiatives I tried with the Zendo Project was to be able to bring volunteer services into emergency departments so that we'd be able to have peer support right there and liberate technical staff and nursing staff to do other things, just like we're doing now with Stadium Medical. But I ran into a lot of obstacles with bringing these services into the ED. And I started realizing these people don't even need to land in the ED in the first place. So we
Right.
took it into the field, and now we've reduced their arrivals. And I've probably been able to say we've made 5 times the difference than what I originally would have been able to achieve if I had stuck with the game plan of trying to bang my head against the wall, getting the services into the healthcare system in the
Yeah.
facilities. Now, if we take it right to where the events are happening, all the better.
I imagine there's still a lot of that that old school kind of just all drugs are bad, and if they're in there doing that, they're just a junkie. I imagine there's still, despite the decriminalization effort in Colorado, there's probably still a lot of that attitude there too, and so you're kind of taking the strain off the healthcare system, and then it's also helped losing some of that stigma because you're getting it taken care of in the field like that. That's really cool.
I think that you're right. There certainly is still some of that, even in Colorado. I'm going to go one further though and add some nuance. I think it's actually less prevalent now than ever that healthcare providers genuinely feel that way, but we don't have the time and composure in the moment to really disabuse a patient of their anxiety that we feel that way.
Right.
If I've made myself clear, they still are functioning on all the years of DARE program and the war on drugs, et cetera. And so they have no reason to think that authoritative figures are maybe actually a little bit more accepting of substance use these days because they don't get any information to counter that other than me just saying it on this call.
Right.
And so they're there and they're projecting within a hypersensitive state. Oh my gosh, these people, they're wearing their badge and their radio and they must just think I'm just the worst. And it's like some folks in these positions do maybe feel that way, but it's honestly, I was shocked once I got into this work to see it's a lot less prevalent than I thought, but it's hard to convey that when you're busy and stressed. And so that's another reason that having a particular service line for providing peer support is so key, because that person can go to great lengths to make sure the guest or the patient in question is actually like able to understand we are not judging you. We're only here to provide help. That's it, you know? So I'm hopeful that that's something where like the posture of police, first responders, healthcare, et cetera, the posture will start to be more indicative of how we're actually starting to be more open and relaxed about the sensation that drugs are so bad. Like most people don't genuinely feel that way, at least in my milieu, but it'd be nice to be able to resource them some techniques to really convey that so that they can put their patients at ease. That's all the treatment some of these people need, you know?
Yeah. And I guess my thought is like, maybe not so much like this person is a bad person because they did drugs. I think it's more of like, this is annoying. Like you just need time and you will be fine. Like nothing's going to happen to you. You're really wasting my time. That's kind of my thought on that. And then I can see what you mean, whereas you're like, dude, I don't have time to deal with this. And like now that side of you is starting to come out versus
yes,
when you have the folks that are, hey, you're here tonight to very specifically deal with people who are not necessarily in danger, but they think that they are because they're in an altered state and they don't think they're ever going to come out of it. And your focus tonight is to only sit with them and help them get through that. Taking that pressure off the other people, like, dude, I have 1,000 other things I really need to be taken care of. And this is not on the top of my priority list.
I agree with all of that. That's a really good insight. I mean, one of the skill sets as an emergency physician I've developed is to actually create a real deep and intimate relationship in 1 minute with a person. And I mean, it comes through as intensity a lot in my dealings in the world otherwise. But in the ED, it serves me well to quickly get right into the thick of the matter and be like, I care about you. And I know that I've only known you for 30 seconds, but trust me, I do. And like, there's something about how you can carry yourself in that way. But that kind of intensity can be off-putting for a person in a non-ordinary state. And so how to adapt the 1 minute encounter in a high intensity situation and bridge that to a maybe 24-hour encounter in the Zendo Project sanctuary. How do we actually like bring those two into alignment where I can, in a couple minutes, while I have 1,000 other things to do, feel like I genuinely am able to be here in the moment with you, I need to forget about the other things for the moment. And I need you to know that I, in fact, am forgetting about those other things for a moment because I am genuinely here with you right now. And that's a really difficult thing to do. Anybody who has young kids would agree. This is a very, very difficult thing to do. You always have other stuff and you're constantly being interrupted, and I'm tired of it. And I just need to say to you, like, you'll be fine. But
Yeah.
they're not going to receive that. And
Right.
ultimately, I, as a provider, will feel the best when I'm, headed home from a tough shift or whatever. I feel the best if I know that I was able to actually ground myself and bring that patient with me. Let us share a nervous system for a bit, and I can kind of like bring them with attunement into a feeling of being held and seen, even in midst of chaos. Whether that's physically chaotic in the ED or in, the first aid at a live event, or if it's internally chaotic with their inner state, you can act as a simple grounding for them, and you can resource yourself on how to do it, even though you might be annoyed that you got yet another patient that's waiting, the ambulance is waiting on you and all that stuff. And the better that you can resource yourself to do that, the higher satisfaction you're going to have as a provider as well. And so I like my shifts the best when I can do that and embody that well.
It makes a lot of sense. It's because it's like you're leading, and when you let your emotions get the better of you, it doesn't feel like you led very well. But then if you can take that and say, I know everybody else is feeling this, and they're coming to me because they're freaking out as well, or whatever. Like, and I feel like I'm kind of getting a little off topic here, but just like that sense of like, no, I kept everybody together because I kept myself together.
Yep.
Yeah, and you being an emergency room doctor like that, you would know that too. You have to be that kind of grounded center. So patients also, so they do trust you like that quickly as well. Like that helps them. Oh, this guy knows what's going on. So yeah, it's a really good just training to do that. And that's what Zendo Project does, help people with that just sit there training and kind of absorb that and take it in. But what I really find really cool about even this whole conversation is that like this wouldn't even be happening if psychedelics weren't like starting to go mainstream. So what do you see as some of the biggest gaps as we move forward into the future? Things that we should really watch out for.
That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. There are definitely folks that have a much more eagle eye view on the whole movement. Um, Call it an industry, call it a reemergence, whatever. Um, I would say, from my vantage point, I am now dialing in on harm reduction and how to support safe practices in the underground spaces. You can call it recreational, but really what it is since there's healing facilities now and or healing centers, that's the above ground, and everything else is basically the underground still. And so I'm trying to bring safety practices to all the different civil servants and safety making institutions that we have for the underground. So I think a lot of I guess I don't know if it's necessarily gaps, which maybe it just feels like it's still underdeveloped, but I think that a lot of community resourcing needs to happen, because we need to accept that most people are going to access psychedelics, whether for healing, whether ceremonial, recreationally, whatever. They're going to be accessing it in the underground because it's out of reach often to go to a formal above ground, vetted, certified place. And so with that comes some of the classic things that we see as hazards in any black market, which is maybe you have an unknown dose, maybe you have an unknown purveyor, maybe the settings that you're finding your use in are not perfectly manicured, or the set and setting is not necessarily optimized. All of those things, and people can name that, but there still takes time to develop community organizations and community spaces that can really optimize all of those things. And some of it, of course, is become so complex that you actually need professionalization in those community spaces to make sure that it's authentic. And so that's where, like, me being a physician is important, at least in this particular operation with the Zendo Project, to make sure that the Zendo Project can operate safely and not accidentally have missed medical misadventures in the space. And that's really an example that you could analogize that all over the place. There's going to be legal stuff that's going to be necessary to have attorneys talking this stuff over. You're going to have issues where dosing is not well known. Maybe it's like, maybe you're not even getting what you're thinking that you're getting. And so filling in those gaps, or continuing to nourish community response in underground spaces, is going to be really, really important. And honestly, that's like an infinite task. Like, it's never going to be done. But I think it will get to where it's much safer all the time, so that accessing this stuff in the underground, especially if you don't already have a strong community, or you haven't been using psychedelics for a while and you're new to it, but it's out of reach to go to a healing center, we need to be able to really authentically say you are safe to, say, come to Denver and go to the Rhino, like the art neighborhood where you can buy psychedelic stuff on the corner, and like, it's going to get used. I mean, we have to accept this. And so how do I help then resource maybe a Zendo project in the neighborhood, for example? How do we get Zendo project trainings into the hospitals, right? Similarly, how do we get test kits right there on the street next to the person who's selling the thing, or you buy it somewhere else and you bring it? Like, so all of these are extensions of enterprise. They're entrepreneurial things that would happen to, in a way, try to professionally make safety within underground spaces.
Yeah, there's a lot of options for that, and it feels, I mean, because that's kind of what we are to that where we come from. Our Psychonaut is basically an underground community,
For sure.
and it's kind of the same thing. It's we have to teach each other, test your stuff, beware of your set and setting, and it's interesting having to professionalize all that. I think it's a good way to put it. Um,
That's
what
not to, and if I can clarify, I realize, like, it might, of course, easy for me to say, I'm a professional. Of course, I would say, oh, you need people like me. But honestly, like, you could argue that there are people that have transcended even the professional apparatus. Like, they're not credentialed like I am per se, but if you could scour our Psychonaut, you probably know more than any one person could possibly know about any single substance or all of them or whatever. Like, the information is there. It's a
right.
matter of creating opportunities for folks that can work through and peruse all of that information and actually turn around and provide a service or provide a value, whether you've got my professional credentials or not. I guess really what I'm saying is I want to formalize everything rather than professionalize it. Maybe that's the better way to say it. Because there are people that could mop the floor with me with their psychedelic knowledge and their neurophysiology knowledge. And maybe these folks haven't even really gone to school. I mean, honestly, like, the information is out there. And so the community that y'all have built is part of what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be community in physical spaces. It can be resourcefulness amongst people across the globe that act as a community to support one another in their practices.
Right. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with the Discord and other places there, so that there's always somebody there connected. Like I did that on the website on Psychonaut, is put in a link that said, hey, if you need help or support right now, go join our Discord server. There's almost always somebody in there if you need to talk right away. It's kind of slow, but I'd love to get more people in there to kind of, liven it up. So, um, yeah. So what are the goals moving forward for the Zendo project, and what can we learn more about them?
I think that there's some internal goals and some external goals, and I can only speak for myself on my perceptions on my perspectives here. But an internal goal for me and the other folks in Denver that are continuing on pioneering our work here is to really create incredible community for ourselves, honestly, like having a strong Zendo community locally so that we can continue to scale how many shows we're able to cover, how many folks we can onboard as coordinator grade providers and be excellent leadership moving forward, and come to know each other deeply, because this is such an intuitive work. It's such a heartfelt work that having a strong community is a big part of it. And we're well on our way for doing that. And I'm really excited about that side of it, because doing this in a vacuum on your own ends up leading to being overextended, and you can't possibly fulfill the duties as authentically or as at scale when we're getting asked more and more to cover shows. So that's an internal hope that I'm seeing well on the way. More on the external, it would be honestly getting venues to know our name without us having to advertise to them constantly or be working on self promotion, but let our work speak for ourselves. And that's what's happening. We have a bunch of advocates on our behalf now in our milieu here in Denver. And I think we're leading by example, demonstrating what world-class care in area nightlife can look like. I mean, Red Rocks is the most attended concert venue in America. They have 1.75 million attendees a year.
Wow.
The only venue that has more is Madison Square Garden. They have like 2.1 million or something. But if you take away basketball games, they have nothing compared to what we've got at Red Rocks as far as concerts. So we need to provide world-class care at a world-class venue. And that has been demonstrated. We need to keep working on that, publishing our findings. We're doing research on this all the time. We're creating new questions and new inquiry based on some of the results that we're seeing. This is good, but we need to ask this other question around here. So we're formalizing all of the reflections and publication and promotion of what we're doing here, so that then we can start to get ever more shows, because planners, managers, service lines, et cetera, even legal counsel, insurance companies, they all know that when we are there or a peer support service is there, it improves the risk profile. It improves the value add when you add it all up as itemized for all the different services and things at a production. Like, we're getting there so that we can get asked to more events. We've already been asked more than we expected for this year. I expect that to continue. And so being able to get those numbers as well turned around, studied, synthesized, and published to get a ball rolling for maybe even other organizations that can operate fully on their own. Or maybe we can have a Zendo representative that goes somewhere and can train up a local crew, and we can have our principles and our organizational like standard maintained in other places, so we're able to scale. So there's all these different means by which we can get our message and our practice out there. Some of it's doing more work at events, some of it's doing more education, being able to tailor some of our trainings to different professional cohorts. I was asked to present the Zendo Project's principles and also psychedelic literacy to the Denver Medical Society. I mean, we're going to have potentially hundreds of physicians that are going to be taking a training that they asked for me to provide simply because they saw what the Zendo Project is doing. Similarly, we could do that for caseworkers and for co-responder models around the country, like the STAR program in Denver, et cetera. So there's all these different avenues that, honestly, I think we're going to get there in all of those and have a big impact. We just need to keep showing up and doing the work and just always churning milk into butter, you know?
Nice.
Well, I imagine you guys have a lot of support from like local, not just, the venue itself, because they're, like you said, it's improving their risk profile, which is probably improving their insurance rates when they have to purchase insurance for an event or something like that. But I know that a lot of times when people organize big concerts like this, especially raves and things like that, a lot of communities don't want them there because of the people that are doing the drugs and things like that, and the way that they act and how they respond. But having you guys there, so from the event promoters standpoint, like they're getting better rates and getting into better places. And then from the emergency services and the local community, they're like, thank God we don't have to worry about having 50, like you said, there was 54 medical transports. And then when you guys were there was only 17, and they were all essential transports that needed real medical assistance. So I'm sure even down to the police, they're like, we don't have to deal with these people. We don't have to try to, some dude shit his pants because he's tripping, and now I got to put him in my car and take him somewhere. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they don't have to deal with those things. And I'm sure, and then from the people actually attending, if they're having a bad experience, they have somewhere to go that's trustworthy. They're not leaning on their friends who have also taken these drugs to try to help them out.
Right.
It's funny because it's you can tell when you're at an event if the medical team is out of sight, then folks sometimes are a little bit more on edge in the crowd because they're actually not sure what to do if something were to go down. Whereas if you have a medical presence, like at the front door, being friendly, hey, have a great show. And like, you get a look like, oh, they're wearing red shirts. Okay, those are the healthcare guys. So if there's an issue, okay, great. So the sheer presence of an excellent service line is helpful to prevent issues. It's the same thing when the Zendo project is there. We actually reduce the likelihood of people spinning out just by existing at all, because people
That's a good
have
point.
known our name for long enough now that when that scene comes to shows, they're like, oh, yes, we're good. The Zendo Project is here. They took care of my friend last year. They're great. And they end up not even really end up needing support, you know? And so I'd love for that to extend to, the hospitals, the police, et cetera, where they're like, oh, yes, Zendo Project is here. Thank you. And one of the most satisfying things I've heard from colleagues when we're working shows together, I was walking up to the sanctuary space that we sometimes have at Red Rocks. I was walking up there to help break it down after a show, and the security team, best in the business, Argus Security, they're compassionate, they're professional, they're efficient, great folks. I love working with them. And they were having a debrief, like all 50 of them in the middle of Red Rocks after everybody had egressed. They see me walking up and they all in unison yell, "We love Zendo Project." And it was like, yes, because they had a lot less angst about being in the situation where a person's not going to respond well to them, and they knew that they had help, and so being able to take stuff off of people's plate when they're not necessarily resourced or feeling comfortable with it just goes such a long way, whether it's the patrons themselves or the services around. And I'd hope that this can lead to a festival having an easier time of continuing to get the permit the next year, because the hospital wasn't overrun, or you didn't have an EMS crew that's transporting that ended up having to tackle a person and like somebody got injured and that made the news. Like those kinds of things are real. And like, it only takes one of those to be the real downfall for an entire festival expression that people spend all year making.
Right.
And the Zendo Project maybe can't solve all of those problems, but man, if we could divert 9 of those 10 encounters away from local services or something, you're sure going to have a better chance of getting that festival renewed for the next year. And right now we're in a festival failure like crisis. I feel like a lot of festivals are not making it for cost or for lack of attendance, or maybe just like a monoculture of like what festivals seem to be the ones that work. And these festivals here with interesting music or something is like not making it or whatever. Like there's all these different perspectives on why festivals are struggling. I want safety to be the last thing that they're thinking about of why they're having trouble and what they need to attend to. So just bring in the Zendo Project or bring in some other peer support service. Let us do our thing. We'll solve problems for you. That's what I would love for the scene to genuinely understand when they're trying to promote these spaces,
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, that's a great point. And if you guys at home, you want to learn more, you can go to zendoproject.org and, learn all about it there, what they do and where, how they do it. I want to say thank you. We're going to close out the public episode. I know Brian's got to hop off here though, but we'll continue it over with the Patreon session, the integration session. We'll talk a little bit more, but we'll see you over there. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. That was our conversation with Case Newsom from the Zendo Project. I thought it was a really enlightening episode. We learned a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really interesting to learn about like what kind of impact they actually have on the local community in terms of like hospital visits, ambulance rides, all that sort of stuff. Like to have like real numbers on that was really cool.
Right. What was it, like 58 the year before, down to 7 or something the year
Yeah,
after? It was
and
stuff.
all of them were actual needed transports to the hospital. Like that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah, like they didn't have to waste resources or time, or and it really helps us, I think, as a community too, that we're taking care of our own. We don't have to outsource that kind of care, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a big step in the right direction.
Right. I think it's great. I think it's, they're doing really important work too, and it's something we all as a community should support. So, for listeners, if you'd like to learn more about the Zendo Project or psychedelic peer support or even volunteer opportunities, be sure to check out the links in the show notes. As always, thanks to our Patreon supporters for making these conversations possible. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider following the show. It's how we keep this thing alive. If you can leave a rating or review, sharing it with someone who might find it valuable, that works too. So,
Yeah.
I'm Elite. I'm with Bryan, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah. Catch you guys later.
Psychedelics can take you deep, but you don't have to go at it alone. Fireside Project is your trusted companion on the psychedelic path. If you're having a tough trip, their free, anonymous support line is just a call or text away at 62-FIRESIDE. Planning a journey? Fireside certified coaches offer personalized video sessions to help you prepare and integrate, starting with a free 20-minute consult. Whether you're on the path, in the middle of it, or just getting started, Fireside is here for you. Learn more at firesideproject.org.